No flossing.
No flossing. Guys, I'm currently, I feel like this is an achievement that I managed to get to the chair without falling. I don't know how many times you wore these, but I'm wearing these every day, and everywhere I go, I fall. Anyways, thanks for having us. Eric, I feel like we need to explain like what is going on.
Yeah, Uri, how did we get into this situation?
Kind of, yeah. You know, well, first of all, Eric and I are from Taproot Wizards, and that should hopefully explain our clothing. But I think we're here because both of us have been into Bitcoin for a very long time. And not only do we have a lot of sentimental feelings about it, we also, I think for a long time, had this shared vision with the Bitcoin community that changed over the years maybe about how Bitcoin would develop and how things are going to play out with Bitcoin over time. It's been, what, I don't know, 14 years since Bitcoin started? Is that right? And the narratives around Bitcoin shifted a lot over that time. But I think that one narrative that was very dominant in the earlier years, let's say in 2013, 2014, when a lot of like altcoins started popping up at the time, like, I don't know, like Litecoin, Monero for privacy. There was some early talk about Ethereum. And I think that the main narrative back then was, look, Bitcoin needs to move slowly. We'll let these other guys try things out. And when they hit something important, we're going to adopt it eventually to Bitcoin if it's good.
Yeah, so me and Uri, we used to be Bitcoin maximalists. And we helped create the problem that we're now stuck with. But there was a good reason for being a Bitcoin maximalist back in the day when we were Bitcoin maximalists. And it was based on this idea that, well, first of all, we were supposed to build something that's known as merge mine sidechains. So we were supposed to, in Bitcoin, reuse the consensus strength of Bitcoin, the hash rate, to secure other chains in parallel. And because of that, we would be able to trustlessly bridge in Bitcoin into those systems, and we would allow Bitcoin to proliferate in chains with completely different consensus rules and characteristics.
You can kind of say that the idea today that people are talking about, in the roll-up space is kind of based, at least in vision, on that sidechain idea, where most activity will be on another chain. That idea actually started with Bitcoin in 2014, right?
Yeah, trustless sidechains was the idea. So the company Blockstream, which was founded in 2014, which got most of the notable Bitcoin core developers, the reason that company was founded was based on the idea that we could create these trustless sidechains to Bitcoin. And why was that interesting? So what was the reason for even building those systems? Well, it was even in the white paper in 2014 that they released. The idea was to build decentralized exchanges, trustless options, derivatives contracts, all those things basically that people are screwing around with in DeFi these days. Was the idea to do on sidechains to Bitcoin. So the reason that we became Bitcoin maximalists was because we thought that we were gonna get to have all that fun that people in the Ethereum space are having, but then all we got was a federated sidechain, like a multi-sig sidechain that's called Liquid, that no one uses, and we got Lightning, and that's kind of when we realized that we need to shake up things a little.
I think at some point, like maybe the dominant approach started to change from, okay, let's look at what altcoins have achieved and try to take the best parts of it, to, no, altcoins are bad. If they're doing something, then we shouldn't do it just because they did it. And we ended up in this situation where there was just this long-term stagnation, I would say, in Bitcoin. It's kind of my view.
Tell me about the Dumbledore of Bitcoin. Do you guys know who the Dumbledore of Bitcoin is? Does anyone raise a hand if you know the name Gregory Maxwell?
There are a few hands. I mean, he's a very talented developer and cryptographer who's been very involved in the earlier years of Bitcoin. And I think it's kind of interesting. He had this a forum post in 2013 where he says, he was actually raving about it. He was like, hey, I read a paper in 2013 by Eli Ben Sasson and went to his talk at a Bitcoin conference about using ZK snarks to compress chain data and run programs that don't run on chain. And he was completely thrilled by the idea. Of course, at the time, it was obvious that that would take a lot of research. And it would also, for integration with Bitcoin, it would necessitate a soft fork and a consensus upgrade to Bitcoin. But I think both he and the kind of technical Bitcoin community of the time was very excited about the idea, the notion of it, and the fact that it could become a thing one day. And I think what's really interesting is, I think now we're there. Like
let me stop you for a second. The one thing that when Bitcoiners looked at Ethereum in the early days, what the general impression was that is a system that tries to run all these, like everyone has to execute the computation for each smart contract in parallel with each other. Obviously, that is not a scalable approach. Like you can't have like a world computer, everyone in the system runs the world computer. Obviously, what you want to do is someone runs the computation, creates a proof, and you verify the proof. So that was back in 2013, what the like intelligentsia of the Bitcoin community thought, that Ethereum people are stupid. They're trying to run this massively complex computation in parallel with each other, while they should be looking into finding ways to succinctly prove that. So what we said in the Bitcoin community, what has been like a meme in the Bitcoin space for a very long time, is that once these altcoins get their shit together and they figure out how to actually do interesting things, viable things, then we will simply integrate that wonderful technology back into the mothership. That was the story that I was promised as a Bitcoin maximalist. That is why I became a Bitcoin maximalist. It was the idea of trustless sidechains and bringing the intelligent way, the useful way of doing things computationally and in expressive ways, that we would bring that back to Bitcoin. But we kind of ossify. We're starting to ossify before now that it's taken a while, right? It's taken Ethereum a long time to actually figure out too that we shouldn't run all the computation on the base layer. We should actually build zero knowledge proofs and zero knowledge verifiers and do the computation that way in second layers. But now we can see that we figured it's being figured out now. We have innovated sufficiently on sort of how you generate zero knowledge proofs, what those proofs can prove, and how efficiently and at which cost you can do that. The costs are coming down. It's becoming like actually viable. It wasn't like only a couple of years ago. It wasn't feasible to really have like high-level languages that you could compile down to something that was easily zero knowledge provable. Now that reality is here, and much thanks to Starkware and the development that is happening on Starknet, it's becoming actually feasible to do that type of computation now. Like you can run it on a blockchain, but the Dumbledore of Bitcoin is no longer in the house. So hence the robes.
Yeah, I think it kind of took a long time, and maybe let's talk a little bit about the motivation, because I think this is a lot more interesting than just trying to copy innovation from Ethereum. I think that Bitcoin has this, in my view, and I think in a lot of people's view, this very important role in the crypto ecosystem as an asset that is, it's truly robust. It's very predictable. It's not going to change. Its monetary policy is not going to change. You can kind of put some Bitcoin aside for 10 years and know that in 10 years you're going to find it in the same way it was.
Probably,
almost for sure.
Hopefully.
And while Ethereum's focus is different, I think Ethereum wants to be an application platform, and ETH as an asset is kind of secondary to the goal of being an application platform. So I think Bitcoin is not ever going to be, even with ZK proofs, Bitcoin is never going to become a competitive application platform. But you would want to use those assets, as collateral and so on, in ways that are trust minimized. There's a very interesting, we talked about this recently, there's a very interesting blog post by Eric Voorhees. I would say that Eric Voorhees is a crypto pioneer. How many of you have heard the name Eric Voorhees? Just out of curiosity, yeah, that's a lot of people. He's a, crypto pioneer, really. A lot of the things that people are doing today are kind of things that, at least conceptually, he started with. And he had this really interesting blog post last year about how, in the Ethereum ecosystem, it's obvious that if you hold some ETH, you want to continue to hold it for the long term, but also you want to take a stablecoin loan. You're gonna use Aave or whatever, and you're gonna get your loan, and it works great, and you don't have to trust them. If you look at the Bitcoin ecosystem, people then tend to go to Celsius to do that, and they go to BlockFi to do that, and then they end up losing all of their collateral. So it's actually kind of important to figure this out for Bitcoin.
We've found ourselves with a bunch of centralized hotfixes to the parts that Bitcoin lack. Unfortunately, even at the transactional layer. So because we can only build so and so sophisticated second layers, we're sort of stuck with Lightning now. And because Lightning is not that easy to build a great user experience on, because you need like inbound liquidity. A lot of people tend to use custodial solutions. So even though like you're trying to have like a safe and sound base layer that's decentralized and trustless, what it ends up for the end users, if you can't build a good enough user experience on that technology, people will end up in centralized custodial solutions because they couldn't use the mainnet in a trustless way because didn't have the flexibility to build efficient second layers on top of it. So when you're aiming for perfection in terms of simplicity and decentralization, there are trade-offs that you make that might make it worse for you. Like decentralization is only really useful. It's not about like how decentralized it is. It's how decentralized is it, and in how many people's hands can I actually get it? If you're only maximizing for decentralization as like one person running that node, then you didn't solve a lot of problems.
Right. And I think one thing that I've personally felt that's very interesting, whenever I discuss roll-ups with people who are mainly Ethereum people, they tend to think of roll-ups as a scalability solution, right? Like, because that's the main thing that it would give, and that's the problem that it solves. But with Bitcoin, kind of surprisingly, it is actually adding functionality. It's not really just a scaling solution. It's maybe not even mainly a scaling solution. It's mostly a solution that adds expressiveness to Bitcoin and adds, smart contract capability that otherwise wouldn't exist. So that actually makes it, I think, in a way, extremely promising on the Bitcoin end. I think that a lot of people are actually kind of sleeping on this. Like it's a technology that's almost ready for prime time, I would say, and it can give, on the Bitcoin side, it would be a massive leap forward.
Yeah, a lot of people in Bitcoin make the mistake of thinking like, and I've been guilty of doing this myself, like a ZK rollup would allow us to like batch prove a bunch of Bitcoin transactions so we could make 35 times as many Bitcoin transactions, but really what it does, it encodes an entire virtual machine that allows us to have like an account-based model, like account abstraction, full express Turing completeness, and like endless flexibility. So for Bitcoin, this is like, not necessarily only a scalability upgrade, it's how we actually can run smart contracts natively on the chain for the first time.
So maybe we should talk about the challenges to get there, like what needs to happen for this to become a reality for Bitcoin? Because I do think that Starks and Snarks can probably fix Bitcoin.
Yeah, so it's not trivial to introduce a zero knowledge opcode. There's two opcodes that we need a way to embed a state machine essentially into Bitcoin, and you can do that through something called a covenants, which is a way to sort of restrict the next output, like how the next output of a transaction can look like. So you need a state machine, and you need a zero knowledge proof verification opcode. There's a bunch of different ways that you could reach that destination. There's a bunch of different configurations for it. The biggest problem that I see is that in Ethereum, because you have like a Turing complete base layer, you can build a bunch of different zero knowledge proof verifiers and use a bunch of different proof systems. Yes, you'll need some additional precompilers if you're building a proof system that is not supported, but in general, you can have a lot of flexibility of which type of zero knowledge proof do you want to verify, which type of VM do you want to build for, and also things like, okay, so we launch a zero knowledge proof smart contract on Ethereum for ZK rollup, but what if we need to upgrade that? That's easy in Ethereum. You can like very easily encode upgrade logic. So you can have an upgrade that's happening on the ZK rollup, but it takes 14 days for the upgrade to happen. And in that meantime, people have time to, if they don't like the upgrade, they can withdraw their assets and they're not impacted by it. So it's not like an admin key that instantly rugs you. You have like a delay function until the upgrade becomes active. And having like that, so the problem in Bitcoin is basically that we need an entire system soft fork, and we can only enshrine like one opcode. Well, we could do a bunch of different ones, but technically speaking, like feasibly, we're going to have to reach consensus within the Bitcoin community that this is the ZK rollup that we're going to use, and then we're sort of stuck with that one until we soft fork the system again. And soft forks in Bitcoin like happen after like 2-3 years of arguing, and then 1-2 years of development, and then 2 years of activation. So they don't really happen that quickly.
But intentionally, there's also a good reason for that. Because you want, because Bitcoin's main like killer feature, in my view, is that it's stable and predictable, and you can always know what to expect, and you know that the monetary policy is not going to change on you. In order to assure that, you have to kind of be very slow and careful and meticulate when it comes to upgrading it, right?
Yeah, but so I think one of the zero knowledge space is like moving forward extremely quickly, rapidly, and there are different polynomial commitment scheme abstractions that are in competition with each other, and one is better than the other. And I don't think that it's really clear yet, like which types of ZK VMs, or is it going to be something that's like Cairo based, or are we going to use RISC-0 and a more traditional programming language, or how is it exactly going to? I think even some fundamental components of how we're going to zero knowledge proof things, if the architecture is going to be LLVM based or if it's something else, like we're getting there. But I think it's hard to go to the Bitcoin community and say this is the one true tried and tested way of doing zero knowledge proofs that we absolutely think is going to be the one and only for the next 15 years. Like we're big fans of Cairo specifically and Starknet specifically, and we're making a case that it might be the best one that we can work on at the moment. But it's also not like we don't have mountains of evidence yet that is actually the case yet. So that is one of the challenges, to like point at one specific ZK rollup system and say, this is what we want in Bitcoin for sure for the next decade.
Right. And then there's kind of the political, cultural sort of challenge, which maybe most importantly, there isn't a clear, super obvious process to upgrade Bitcoin. Even if we did know all of the answers to those technical questions, I'm not convinced that we would know how to make that happen, right? Because I think that over the years it became more and more difficult probably to kind of promote and activate changes to Bitcoin. And that I think that happens for two reasons. One, because unlike Ethereum, Bitcoin is kind of intentionally limited. You cannot, it is, of course, there isn't Turing complete VM, and you cannot do whatever you want, right? So whenever you want to try something new that is beyond Bitcoin's capabilities, you kind of have to ask for permission. And the second reason is we don't know who we're supposed to ask permission from, which is because Bitcoin doesn't have a Bitcoin Foundation like the Ethereum Foundation, and it's not clear who would be the one who decides. So that is kind of a process of discovery, I would say, of even how to make that happen. And we think, I don't know how many I don't know how many people have you got to interact with Bitcoin people online. There's this group that we like to call the Bitcoin laser eyes. That many, if some of you have visited Twitter, you might have ran into some of them. And they tend to be very much against change and definitely against the idea of, I don't know, smart contracts at all, probably. And they're against most things, to be to be honest. They're against vegetables and, So I think that for an outsider perspective, for someone who's a developer in the Solana ecosystem or the Ethereum ecosystem, you look at that and you're like, okay, I don't even want to get anywhere near that. This is not going anywhere. I think that kind of our message is, this is not the real Bitcoin community. It exists, it's online. We actually think it's pretty small. I think maybe, I don't know, maybe 20,000 people. I don't think they're very, if you compare that to the base of Bitcoin holders, which is what, I don't know, 10 million people now? Some people are saying 100 million. So I actually think it's a very small community and not really relevant. So
it's changing.
And it's changing.
We saw that with the, you probably heard about the Taproot upgrade in Bitcoin. It wasn't the only upgrade. The segregated witness and Taproot in combination allowed us to basically exploit script in Bitcoin so that we could, there's no longer any script limitation on how big you can make a script in Bitcoin. And you can write a specific script that just doesn't execute any code, so it just becomes an arbitrary data blob. So you can fill an entire Bitcoin block with JPEGs now, if you want to. And that's what we discovered. Casey Rodermore, the inventor of the ordinals protocol, discovered that in sometime last year. And that's why there are, how many, like 30 million JPEG, 30 million ordinal inscriptions?
Yeah.
On Bitcoin now, and that has brought with it like a whole new movement in Bitcoin, and we can see that there are other people, like there aren't just these vegetable hating. If you give the Bitcoin community just something to play with, they will come. They are out there. They exist out there, and that's sort of the community that we want to encourage and rally, because that might be the only way that we could get an upgrade like a ZK rollup into Bitcoin.
Yeah. I think what we've learned is if we give people something to play with, and if we dump a lot of wizard JPEGs on the Bitcoin blockchain, then it actually, a lot of kind of dormant Bitcoiners start to activate and be like, hey, this is actually cool. Okay, sure, I'm an Ethereum developer, but I also own BTC and I care about Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin to succeed, and I can play around with that chain a little bit. And hey, maybe there are other things we can do. So, on that
but Udi,
note,
yeah, there's. It's okay. You should just like talk about stuff. But what are you actually doing about this? Are you doing anything?
No. So okay. So we think that bringing like snarks to Bitcoin, I think is very promising, but I think it's a very long journey. I think there's a lot of answers that need to be answered, and it'll take a very long time. However, we're ready to start, and we've worked with our partners, Kazar Labs, in order to I guess we can release it today.
We developed a DA, a Bitcoin DA module for the Madara stack, so that Madara, the Madara sequencer, we're going to open source it today. Which will allow you to run the Madara sequencer and sequence data into this ordinal inscription blob space in Bitcoin, so that you can use that to run sovereign rollups on Bitcoin. So that's going to be released today.
Yeah, it's a first step. If you're interested in that, you should, at 5 p.m., you should go to the showcase of the winners of the hackathon that was yesterday, because they're going to present it there.
Yeah, they're the ones that you should be applauding for. We just
we just
dressed up in wizard costumes, basically. They built the thing. Kazar Labs,
Yeah, so that's today, 5 p.m. at stage 2. Thank you, everyone. We think that Bitcoin is gonna be very magical very soon. Well, over time.
Thanks for coming.